say, pessimistic, let's say, article, because there was a very famous paper by Gruniak, if I remember, published in Journal Economic Surveys in 2008, that basically tried several tests for bubbles proposed in the economic literature. And basically they find out that actually we're not able to find bubbles, or sometimes they tell you that it was a bubble when it wasn't. So unfortunately very pessimistic result. In the last years, also I would say, thanks to the proposal coming from physics, also economic theory come back to studying a new test. Because now basically there are kind of two approaches, two main families of approaches. One that we'll see now in a minute come originally from physics. Are there any physicians here that come from physics or similar? Okay. That basically come from physics, and in fact are now under the name of so-called econophysics, because originally they come from the theory of ferromagnetism, that basically when you have plus and minus, you have polarization. Usually imagine a piece of iron, okay? At the beginning there are both positive and minus. But if you put a magnet, everything gets polarized. So a bubble can be shown to be a situation where all of a sudden, immediately, we have a situation where all people have the same opinion. Like in the piece of metal, we have all the same sign. Okay. Actually, this method in physics are also used, very famous, for example, to measure the so-called breaking points. Probably if some of you come from engineering, you want to measure the breaking point of metal. For example, this is very important for rockets. Okay, at which point the pressure of the air will break the steel, sorry, not the iron, the steel. So it's a method that I use to understand when the metal breaks. Why such a thing can be interesting for us? Because the crash of a bubble can be interpreted as a breaking point when the situation collapses, it's no more sustainable. Okay, just think at the real estate bubble in the US in 2008, that people basically were buying flat even without income, really. Идея такая, я куплю квартиру. У меня деньги нет, зарплаты нет, у меня работы нет. Но в следующем году эта квартира будет стоить 2 раза больше. Поэтому я буду платить ипотеку и получить тоже деньги. Bila очень известная картина, это первая страница журнала, не знаю, это Newsweek or другие, где был человек, который он садился против дома, он сказал, это мой банк, против дома. Потому что, вы знаете, каждый год цена будет 2 раза больше. Понимаете, такая ситуация. Что человек не работает, но это он стоит больше и больше, я буду продавать и купить, и все. Понимаете, такая ситуация не может продолжать до бесконечности. So we have a breaking point, a situation when is no more sustainable. And of course, some method of physics come to mind. And we'll discuss a little bit today. Actually, 2 of them that come. Another one is instead an approach that I propose that actually probably now is the main approach in economics, because they're proposed by one of the major American economists, which is Phillips and his PhD students. And we'll see later basically the idea of this test basically is so-called rolling, recursive rolling of augmented Dickey-Fuller regression. Augmented Dickey-Fuller regression, probably most of you know, is a unit root test. Все знают, что это unit root test, augmented Dickey-Fuller? Кто не знает, что это augmented Dickey-Fuller тест? Окей, это тест, который ты используешь, чтобы ты понимаешь, если данные они стационарные или нет. Что значит, что данные стационарные? Обычно мы используем, we use the assumption of weakly stationarity. So data are weakly stationarity if, если только если среднее не меняется времени, это константа, среднее, разность дисперсии, волатильности не меняет дисперсии. So, в статистику слабо стационарно значит первые 2 моменты распределения не меняют. The mean and the variance don't change. Это stationary. To check for stationarity, we use the augmented Dickey-Fuller test or other test. And it's possible to show, we'll see today, a recursive rolling estimation augmented Dickey-Fuller test can be used to find out, actually not exactly for bubble, but for so-called explosive behavior. Okay, because remember, so when basically the price tend to increase much more, increase over time continuously, so it's more and more sustainable. But that we will see during the day. Today I want to propose you three approaches that are quietly used a lot now. So the first one is so-called log periodic power law, LPPL, log periodic power law, proposed by Didier Sornet, probably one of the most famous econophysicists and also physicist himself, because really, if you see his page, really it's it's a multidisciplinary expert, because it goes from earthquake forecasting to statistics to econophysics. It's a huge, probably one day we'll get the Nobel for physics, not for economics, because economists hate the Sornet, economists nenavidit Sornet, because unfortunately there's a very bad relationship between econophysicists and economists. It's a pity. Actually, this is more in the US. In Europe and Asia is not. They collaborate and so on. And in the US, unfortunately, there is a very not good relation between the two. So I give you the idea of this model. So basically, the expected value of the natural log of the price follow this this function. Давай я симулирую, секундочку, я покажу, как это работает. Как это показывает эта функция. Потом возвращаю на это код. Я только хочу показать функцию. Как это покажу. Секундочку. Это R. Потом возвращаю в конце. Сейчас. Okay. Эта функция, которая я только что... So, this mathematical function that you see here look like that. So, which is a classical aspect of log periodic power. So, slow, then increases exponentially, then decreases, then increases half, and then seems to go to the infinite. Then we have a crash. Here we have the critical time is called, so just возвращаем. We have the moment of the crash. Okay. If you take the Nasdaq index up to 2000, it looks like that identically. This is a classical, really simulated, jag tolkar stå simulera, but example how a log periodic power law. So it's a classical, Sornet used a lot this in ex post and ex ante, so before as a forecast, and really works very well. Actually, in the professional field is used a lot this method because it's the one that actually works very well in forecasting ex ante a bubble. And also understand if you follow financial market, you see that such a behavior, this increasing exponential behavior is quite common in case of bubble. Basically, to give you the idea, then we'll come back to the formula. So this method supposes that price increases super exponentially, more than exponentially. You see, we have this exponential that go to the sky basically. There are from time to time it comes back. There are some correction, but increase over time. Okay. Also, this can be a classical figure that also present in all the books about panics and crashes. That basically will increase, then we will first fall, then increase, then okay, everything is okay, then the crash takes place. So coming back to the formulation. So. If you are curious how about all the story about this, unfortunately I don't have time. I really advise you. Probably one of my successful publication. If you want to know more about this, I'll discuss a little bit. I advise you to go to find this paper that was done with a student of mine, and it's probably one of my successful in terms of downloads. Now you understand why I use everything, Sergey. Everything else, but about log periodic power law for bubble modeling. who is the PhD student. Unfortunately, he worked. He was a very talented physician. Я понимаю, в частный рынок они платят побольше. On very, very talented, really. Was very, very strong study. Anyway, he didn't want to do the university, but I understand it. And really here we describe in the European Journal of Finance, you find all the details how we get that formula, how we get, because basically, I told you the idea is that basically we have, I'll tell you the idea just briefly. In the market there are basically two groups of traders. One uninformed traders without any special knowledge, and another group informed with special knowledge like market makers or so, informed traders in science like that. And usually more or less they deal with each other randomly more or less. At a certain moment, for some reason, for some shock, these randomly agents all start to have the same information. Okay? So and this is when the bubble forms. Everyone is positive. The price will always go up. Everything will be good. It will be the gold age. So in this case, when the stock price a bubble forms. So in the end of this, you find here all the how it starts, how to do all this. We get this formula. Okay. So if you want to do the details, please see that paper on the European Journal of Finance. So let's comment step by step each formula. So here we model the natural log of the price. Sometimes you can also model the price without, but it's better use the logarithm because it works better numerically. So what is the constant A? A represents the value of the price at the time of the critical time, that is at the time of the crash, let's say. This represents should be the top price, the type at the peak of the bubble. To tell you B represents basically the increase over time, the kind of derivative of the increase of the time of the price before the crash. Okay. C instead is the parameter that determines the oscillation. Is the parameter that determines how big are these oscillations, if it is smaller or larger. Okay, beta in this model is the most important parameter. Почему? Because, and I refer to my paper on the European Journal of Finance, only if beta is between 0 and 1 we have evidence of a bubble. This is the first condition. We'll see other important conditions later, but this is the most important condition for a bubble. In this model, the condition for a bubble is that beta should be between 0 and 1. If beta is not between 0 and 1, we have no bubble. So we can make a test of a bubble by testing beta. Okay? So this is first and most important condition. Later, over time, due to some criticism and some analysis, more detail, people have had additional condition, but this still is the most important. Omega is the frequency, so C is the dimension of oscillation, omega is the frequency of oscillation around the trend, and phi here is the phase parameter. You know, if we do a pravalnach, is the phase between waves. Okay, it's really just a phase parameter. It's not important. Also, I want to tell you a comment important. The key point parameter beta for the bubble and omega for the frequency. A, B, C, and phi can be shown to depend on beta and omega. Econometrically speaking, we can say when we maximize the log line, когда мы максимизируем максимальное правдоподобие, phi, A, B, and C, они зависят от beta and omega. The econometrics, in econometrics, the situation is called as concentrated likelihood. So a group of parameters depends on something else. So when I maximize the log likelihood, I express the log likelihood only as a function of the key parameters, beta and omega. All the other depends on beta. После я нашел beta и omega, A, B, and C, and phi, они зависят от быстро. Не должен максимизировать. Я максимизирую только против бета и омега. Okay? in econometrics, this is an example of concentrated likelihood, where instead of maximizing, estimating with all the parameters, only maximize with respect only two, because all the other are instability bound. Okay. So conditions for a bubble, positive bubble is increasing. Of course, can be negative bubble. So, as I told you, beta should be between 0 and 1. This was the first, historically, the most important one. But after some critics, that now people use also an additional condition by Borner and Meister that shows that the hazard rate should be not rate, the crash rate, sorry, the hazard rate or crash rate. What is the crash rate? Is the probability that tomorrow there will be a crash, given that today there was no crash. It's hazard rate, statistically speaking. And this should be positive. Okay, otherwise the model does not make sense. Okay, if it is not positive. Okay. Also, another condition, the last development, because there was also, this model was extremely debated between economists and physics. Actually, it works. I would say that many economists probably они ненавидят такой модель, потому что он работает. So они чуть-чуть, как to envy по-русски, to envy? Завидуют. Они завидуют, он работает. Bila очень большое количество людей, которые не смотрят такой модель раньше, до пузырь, лопнет. И он очень, поэтому они чуть-чуть не это нравится, so they envy that. The last condition that was added in 2014 for this to have a model is that the residuals of this equation should be stationary, which is an important condition for estimation. So if the residual остатки такое уравнение они стационарные, это значит мы можем оценить это модель, это не explorer. It's kind of a deterministic model. It's a нелинейный детерминированный модель, поэтому можно оценивать. Если это не стационарный, это значит пузырь не существует, потому что это такой пузырь не существует, поэтому это другой модель нам нужен. Okay. So this is three conditions. Beta between 0 and 1, positive probability of a crash tomorrow given that the crash today there was not, and residuals, error term should be stationary. The first work, the first paper say that use such a model with Bitcoin is by McDowell in 2014, and he used it for forecasting really the first, probably not the first, the biggest bubble crash in Bitcoin prices in December 2013 when there was the peak. Remember, there was a moment when the Bitcoin was over 1,000. So that it was going up, and when it will stop, really, it was incredible when it was going. And then the markets crashed. After 2 months, it goes down very quickly. And I think the crash after December, this huge crash so quickly, and the panic that created was also one of the reasons probably behind empty GOX. Even though still today there are a lot of story, legends, it's not yet clear. Professor Gay probably knows better than me about this bankruptcy of empty GOX. So probably the fall after December, so people taking away the Bitcoin and selling because they want to monetize because the price was really falling very rapidly. As also we discussed with the colleague before, given that it's not specialized people, so oh my God, Господи, я продаю, потому что он упадет. So, and this of course created probably so much pressure on some exchange like MTGOX, which was the biggest at the time, and then went back. But probably there was also fraud, there were problems, of course, there was not the only one, of course. But it's, it's a accumulation of factors, okay? So, and McDowell used this model and successfully forecasted the crash. So this is why I propose it, because it was an interesting application of this test. Now I propose another second approach, which is, say, a more refined version, extension, as is approached by Chi and Fry. Actually, it's more Chi is a student of Fry, actually. That start from the base of the model of Sornet, but develop. It's more a statistical model, more than physics. This is a purely statistical model. Joe Fry, which is a very nice, talented young statistician at the University of Sheffield in UK. This is a very nice guy, really. You can contact him, very, very nice guy. I also have to thank him because he gave me the code, so if I have time I'll show you, that replicates the result of his paper. So he starts from this model, I'll try to discuss a little bit also to give you an idea. And he applied this model actually in a couple of papers, but particularly Chi and Fry, the paper published on Economics Letter in 2015 about Bitcoin, where he used this model to model the bubbles in Bitcoins. So an idea of the model, как он работает. So we have PT, the price, which depend on P1T. P1T is the in stochastic calculus the classical geometric Brownian motion. Okay. So it's a classical for people without stochastic calculus. Say it's a kind of random noise process, so without any particular direction. We have some mean, some noise in the volatility, but they say classical trend with some noise process. Just to tell you in a very simple word, okay? Then we have K. K represents the percentage of loss after a crash. Okay, so I told you the model by Fry actually is a purely statistical or stochastical model. Even though I have the starting point is similar to the one that we saw before. Just see my paper in European Journal of Finance, but then goes completely statistical. Really. So it's purely, in fact, probably this is why it was published in Economic Journal because it's purely statistical. There's no reference to physics. So we have a price that originally follows geometric Brownian motion, and then multiply by the percentage of loss in case of a crash. NGT is a jump process, which is 0 before the crash and 1 after the crash. Okay? So if we use the ethos lemma for those that haven't done stochastic calculus is a way to find how a process evolves given the original process. So I have a process, I modify this process, and I want how this modified process evolve. How to find the dynamic of this modified? I use ethos lemma. Okay, this is the idea. Of course, if you have done stochastic calculus, you know that. But just to give you an idea for people who never done stochastic calculus. So ethos lemma is a way that I have a process, this one, the original. I modify, I put the jump process. Я чу знать, как это продолжает. I use this lemma in order to understand the dynamic of this. And I have these dynamics. This is the stochastic continuous time dynamics of this process with jumps. Okay. Then Fry actually published a lot of papers about it. Some in economic journals, some in physics journals. Make some assumption on the mean of the process, on the variance of the process, and so on, and also some assumption on the probability of a crash. So the expected value that we have a crash, a time between t plus delta. Delta is a small piece of time, minus gt, the probability of crash today, is delta ht. Delta ht basically is the change in the probability of a crash. This is the small change in the probability of crash over time. So these are statistical assumptions to model the probability of the crash. Here we go to two important results of this modeling. At the end, doing some computation with ethos lemma and stuff like that, we get two very, very interesting results. And I'll tell you why. So in case we have a bubble, okay. By the way, I'll come. What is V? V, I tell you here, is minus the natural logarithm 1 minus k. So it's a function of the fall, of the probability of a fall in a crash. Remember, V is an important parameter in this model of Fry. Represent is a function of the percentage of the crash. Okay? Coming back. Because let's go a minute to the final result of it. So according to the model of Fry, after a lot of computation and solutions, we find out that the mean of the process at time t should be able to the original mean of the normal process without bubbles, Vs positive, plus an amount which is proportional to the fall in case of crash and the probability, the other rate of a crash. Что это значит? Это значит, если я в рынке, где есть вероятность пузыри, должен платить меня дополнительный час, дополнительный прибыли, чтобы ты можешь компенсировать вероятность crash. So that you should compensate me for the probability of the crash. This is the compensation, let's say, the additional return, additional profit that you have to pay me to the original because there is a possible crash, possible bubble. Second result, even more interesting, probably initially counterintuitive, but actually this is very, very interesting. I'll tell you now the reason. Trade to the Second result, volatility, разница дисперсии, второй момент распределения. Не сказал, Model Fry, он спокойный, работал, все используют нормальное распределение. Понимаю, наверное, он сделал тоже статья, где не использует нормальное распределение, использует более сложные, но в этой статье использует нормальное распределение. The volatility of the process, if there is a bubble, is a yes posier, should be equal to the normal volatility in case of no bubbles, minus a component, V square это позитивный, HT это вероятности, поэтому позитивный вместо нуля и 1. So, if there is a bubble, volatility should decrease. Okay? The volatility should decrease over time. Seems how can be? Remember, if the bubble, there is a bubble, the volatility tends to decrease. Okay? You see here an example with it's a different model, but you see, here it's quite large, and then it's decreasing the oscillation. Actually, this is resulting very interesting because it's an additional confirmation of the so-called, probably you have heard, some of you, the Minsky moment. Have you heard about this Minsky moment? Some of you? Minsky was a Russian author that emigrated in the US in the 50s, if I remember correctly. He did some contribution, probably actually only one article of interest, but really it was kept under the radar. It was not, the big name like Samuel. So it was a quite successful, but really not particularly. But his work was basically later developed because his work were extremely good. It basically was his explanation of the Great Depression in the 30s was basically later rediscovered to be extremely good also to understand the Great Recession 2008. And so there was his work was rediscovered, particularly thanks to many economists like Steve Keen and so on. And there was so he used the definition of the Minsky moment. So a moment when we have a crash, when all the system collapse. Minsky, was an economist of the 50s. He expressed his ideas only by talking. Like all the economists, he didn't write really formulas. It was like Keynes. His main opera, like Keynes, were basically descriptive, explaining, and so forth. Here is one of the many confirmations right now that in the case of a bubble, the volatility is decreasing. In fact, one of his famous expressions is that stability is destabilizing. Stability is destabilizing. So if there is excess stability, is extremely stable, it's like, to put it another way, is the calm before the storm. Okay. In fact, there was a famous Australian economist, Steve Keen, that put in his t-shirt, stability is destabilizing. That is where this famous expression from the work of Minsky. Okay. That before the crash of a bubble, you have a falling volatility, everything is good, everything is stable, and then you have a crash. So this is why, and here we have a statistical confirmation. You see, volatility in case of a bubble should decrease. Okay, volatility should decrease. So this is why interesting, because basically provide confirmation of this very old idea of Minsky. They told you it was a normal economist, also poor guy at the beginning, he also suffered because he was living in the 50s. In the 50s in the US there was this nasty phenomenon of McCarthyism. McCarthyism is kind of a purge of every communist-related people by McCarthy. It was extremely tough purge. And given that was emigrant from the from Russia, he had really to be very careful in which word to use because he could be kicked out from university. And so he was very, very careful. So he published a couple of papers, one in American Economic Review, for example, but he remained more or less under the radar, let's say. It was only after basically the crisis of 2008 that everyone come back, the Minsky moment, so it became is being glorified, and correctly so, because it did a very perfect analysis. Now people are trying to put into formulas to formalize his work, really his work. And this is one other confirmation. So how can we test for a bubble in this framework? Just so we finally reach. The test is that coefficient v that I told you is minus natural logarithm of 1 minus k, so it's a function of the percentage of the loss, is 0. So the null hypothesis that no bubble, this is 0. So if there is no bubble, the mean is equal to the original mean without bubble, the volatility is without the component for the bubble. Okay? So also this approach is interesting because if there is no bubble, the price, so doing the computation under no bubble is the initial price time the exponential. If we solve the stochastic process, the previous geometric binary motion, of course we have the classical equation. So initial price time, exponential, mean rate. Okay, this is the classical solution of geometric binary motion. Okay, if instead there is a bubble, we have a little bit different. We have also the other rate and so on. So we follow this normal distribution with this mean rate. The h, big H, is the integral between 0 t of the other rate. So it's the cumulative probability of a crash. So this is the normal distribution that we have to estimate with maximum likelihood or other method, where we have my trend, my crash probability, and so on. And here you see the volatility minus the decreasing component due to the bubble component. Okay? If we solve also this, the price in case of a bubble, so PB, P bubble, is initial price time mu tilde, which is the initial part, plus the bubble component. Okay? So this approach is nice because if there is a bubble, we also can compute the component of the bubble by simply subtracting this part from this part. So sorry, the initial part with no bubble from the part with bubble. Okay. So by solving the bubble component, if you solve the two equations, is given 1 minus and this integral for the other rate. Of course, the last ingredient, который я еще не сказал, in this model is the other rate. Как мы можем моделировать вероятности crash завтра, если не был сегодня? Он использует такую формулу. One day I will have to ask him where it takes. It's a kind of simplified, also come from physics. This kind of formula for the other rate is quite used in physics to model this probability of crashes or breakings. If you use this, you find basically this small formula. Basically here you have a small integral. You can use any numerical solver to find this integral. Okay. So Frey used this test in this paper published in Economics Letter to test if we have a bubble using data between January 2010 up to November 2010. That is before the crash started in December. And for all in this period, and also for all sub-period where he tested. Oh, извините. I touched the end button, извините. So he tested this hypothesis that there is no bubble component between January 2013 and December 2013, and he found out that we reject mi advergant cuiu nulloio hypothesis. So we have bubble. Okay. Also, using the previous formula, so the previous difference between the model with bubble and model without, you find out that the bubble component at the time was approximately 50% of the price. So 50% of the price, of the Bitcoin price in 2013 was approximately bubble component, okay? According to his model. So this is the main model. We'll see then application with R. Finally, we present what is now the semi-modern test of literature economic de l'Apusieri, proposed by Phillips, this big name in the economic arena, proposed in several papers. Here, the most famous one, particularly the one that I'm referring to, because he started with the test, then they do some extension. So I propose you the best test, because he proposed several tests, but the best is the so-called Generalized Supremum ADF test by Phillips, published in the International Economic Review in 2015. So the idea in itself is quite simple, and I tell you now. This is the famous augmented Dickey-Fuller regression. So, это цена биткоина, например, тренд, цена биткоина вчера и the first differences of this. Конечно, на литературе может быть первый раз, но давай так, потому что нам нужна такую формулу. So the price depends on the price yesterday and, осторожно, the first differences, первые разницы. Okay. Что мы хотят тестировать? Это наш третий тест. Пропозиция. We want to test that это коэффициент ρ, это 1, это не стационарный, против альтернатив, где ρ это более чем 1. Если вы помните от анализа временных рядов, когда ρ это 1, это не стационарный. Когда это ρ это более чем 1, это explosive process. It's a process that increases continuously over time. It's explosive. In itself, there was an economist, I don't remember who, said that actually this test is even more general than the test by Surnet or by Fry, because those are tests for log of the price. So in case of super exponential, so which is a so you have super exponential growth. Super exponential is a special case of explosive behavior. You can have explosive behavior which are not super exponential. So super exponential, which is the model of Sonnet, is a special subgroup of this one. Okay. Quite large, very common, but so this is a little bit more general, let's say, because you can have explosive behavior without being super exponential. Okay. Of course, testing this hypothesis cannot be done with the usual t-statistic, because unfortunately the distribution of this test это не стандартный. Это такой длинная формула, полная процесс Винера и так далее. So you have to use simulation method. You have to use, and also this is only the beginning. Because to test this, we have to use a so-called rolling regression. Я сейчас покажу пример, что это более понятно. Что он делает. Сейчас. Первую даю идею, потом возвращаем. Это пакетч, который не пакетч, но это... Окей. Это наш тест. Сейчас объясню, это потом возвращаем. So, you know, the idea of this test, so это наш интервал. Интервал это между 0 и 1, это стандартизованный. Если у нас, например, 1000 данных, это стандартизованный между 0 и 1. So, we just standardize the data to have it between 0 and 1. Okay? Мы хотим найти, если у нас в этом период, может быть, 1 год, 2 года, 3 года, 5 лет, 20 лет, 200 лет, в этом периоде у нас был пузырь.
So this is a very nice test because in some sense, не забыл говорить вещь. Первые две тесты, которые я говорил вам, the log periodic power law model by Sonnet and the model by Fry, который мы видели только что, эти модели, которые они проверяют, если у нас один пузырь, здесь, в этом периоде. Okay? Вы можете использовать такие тесты, которые мы посмотрели раньше, только если мы сделаем много раз. Но эти тесты, они тесты, которые проверяют на один пузырь, в этом периоде. Этот тест, я думаю, это самый интересный аспект, этот тест, вы можете использовать, проверяя, если были много пузырей. Не только один. So, я хочу знать на 20 лет в этом периоде, сколько пузырей было, если были пузыри. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, let's say, is the first test, первый тест, that check if there are bubbles and how many. Okay? And tell you also exactly in which period you have those bubbles. So it's the first test for potentially multiple bubbles. Не только один. Может быть много, например, если вы думаете, например, акции США, the dot-com bubble, real estate bubble, и еще раньше. So, no, если вы анализируете stock market, if you analyze the stock market over 200 years, there were a lot of bubbles. Okay? This test is very general. You can test for many. The problem, I already tell you now, I repeat many times on this test, is that it's extremely computational intensive. Really computational. I published a paper just now about a negative bubble on the oil price, because the oil price that for continuing the last 2 years really is having a negative bubble. I'll discuss a little bit at the end. And I use this test. And for this, to compute this test, I need a couple of days with the server with the 8-core processor to compute all the statistics. Я знал только позже, что сейчас Amazon и Google дают вам возможность на несколько денег, $10-20 использовать как сервер, где есть 1000 процессоров. Если я знал пораньше, я был рад. Я не должен подождать несколько дней и недели, потому что я могу использовать только сервер моего университета. Потому что сейчас объяснено, ты должен делать симуляции, это как экспоненциальная симуляция. Это один процесс нужно 1000 симуляций, и каждого нужно еще 1000 симуляций. So, у вас 1000 на 1000, so, миллион симуляций. So, это кошмар. But it's the good thing, this is the bad thing. The good thing that really it can use for multiple bubbles over a long period of time. Возвращаемся. What it does? It compute basically несколько слов про нотации. R1 это где окно оценка начинается, R2 это где окно оценка заканчивается. Okay? RW это размер оценки. 10 данных, 20 данных, 30 данных и так далее. Что делаем? Идея этого теста это менять размер оценка ADF. Потому что, давай сделаем, когда мы сделаем документы Fuller, что мы сделаем? Мы берем все данные, R2 это один, все вперед. Это документы Fuller. Okay? Но я хочу знать, тестировать это на все периоды. Он нашел самая лучшая процедура, это менять начало периода оценки и конец периода оценки. So, to change the initial point and the final point. So, for example, first a small sample, then a larger sample, then even a full sample. Then a small sample starting from here, from 1950, например. Then a sample that starts 1950 up to 1980. Then a sample that starts 1950 up to 2015. Then a sample that starts in 1990 up to 2000, 1990, 2001, например, 1990, 2015. Okay? So, it's the recursive estimation of augmented Fuller test for all possible combination of the starting point and ending point. So you have a lot of regression. show usually numerically when you compute the critical value, for each point you have to use the bootstrap. Bootstrap basically you simulate the distribution. So for each point of this, you have to simulate 1,000 random draws, and on this random draw you have to compute the distribution. So you have an increasing exponential number of this simulation to do. So basically, the test is simply, here you have it, the supremum, so the Sami-Wysocki augmented decay Fourier test on all these possible augmented decay Fourier tests. Где мы меняем конец период, R2 может быть R0 до 1. R0 это самый минимальный, потому что, знаете, нам нужно small peer, at least we cannot make a augmented decay Fourier with two data, we need at least some observation. Philips он нашел, что самое минимально это 1.8% плюс корни количество данных, so square root of t, so 1.8% plus square root of t, это самое оптимально. Is the minimal sample, so that we have to use. And the initial points start from 0 up to R2 minus the minimum sample. And we try all possible combinations. And for each one of these, we have to simulate the bootstrap distribution at least 1,000 times. So, incredible number of simulation. Okay? In this case, so the test itself is given by the highest of all these tests. This is the test. Also, for each point, I compute the critical value of this distribution. Okay? This test consists of two procedures. First, I compute this test, okay? I take the highest, the supremum statistic means the highest value. If this test, this statistics, is higher than the critical value simulated, this means that at least a bubble, at least one bubble was present in this period. So, Pierre Wishak, найду эту статистику, и, конечно, critical value, эту статистику, которую я симулирую после 1 миллион симуляций. Если статистика да более чем critical value, это я отвергаю, что пузырей нет. Минимум одна была. Минимум. Это не конец. Давай покажу здесь, потом возвращаем, а я что покажу всем. Это пример. Я покажу пример, потому что я не могу сделать здесь, потому что это очень длинный процесс, но... Okay. Actually, this is not the G, is another test, but I use it because already there was the picture. So here you see the critical simulated critical value, see? That is simulated, okay? This is the recursive statistic over time, computed starting from here up to, is if between, is a test of bubbles over from 1870 up to 2010. So they test for bubble over 140, 130 years in American stock market. This is one of the tests used by Philip, but that is the same. So, in green you see the Standard & Poor's 500. The red line is the simulated, the recursive simulated critical values. The blue is the test statistic. You see that it's high a little bit here at the beginning, and here in the big crash in around 2008. You see that it's higher than the critical values. Okay. So just to tell you an idea. So basically, in this case, we would have only two, at least, very strong bubbles at the end of the 19th century and in the so-called dot-com bubbles here. Actually, this is not the GSADF, it's a sub-test which is less powerful. If you use the GSADF test, you find a little bit more bubbles than this one. I want to show the picture to make you understand how to use this test. Первый Statistika critical value. Если мы отвергаем, пойдем дальше и проверяем, когда статистика была высокой, чем recursive critical value. Когда была высокая, у нас пузырь, когда меньше, чем это не пузырь. Это первый пузырь, это первый пузырь. Еще, конечно, Phillips советовал, что пузырь обычно должен быть длинный несколько периодов, потому что это, здесь это несколько лет, это не проблема. Но если вы используете такой тест, данные, которые не каждый день, with daily data, sometimes this test may show you that you have a bubble which lasts for a week, which is not a bubble. In fact, Phillips advised that you should have at least some minimal dimension which depend on the frequency. There is a formula I don't remember by heart. So depending on the frequency, the bubble should last at least a minimum period. Because a bubble that lasts 1 week doesn't make sense, He proposed a formula depending on the frequency. Okay? So to tell you this test has become very, very successful. Actually, the GSA is generalized Supremo DF test is an extension of this, which is even more powerful than this. But the idea is the same. It's very famous now in the economic arena. There are a lot of applications because, I told you, the beautiful aspect that really you can understand if there are multiple bubbles. Okay, one bubble here, one bubble here. So 2 bubbles, for example. Okay. И раньше это не было возможно это сделать. И этот тест очень сильный, so it's very nice statistical properties, and so on. Как я сказал, большой проблема. It's very numerical intensive. It's a beast, really. It's really кошмар. Because really you need миллионы симуляций и оценки. Okay. И слава богу, мы сделаем, возвращаясь сюда, мы сделаем простые ADF regression. Okay. Слава богу, мы только сделали такой простые метод наименьших квадратов. Потому что если бы другой метод, это была конец мира. Okay. So, anyway, this is very, very computational intensive. Currently, at the end, if we have time... сколько осталось, прошу прощения? 10 минут. Потом покажу чуть-чуть. Я сейчас вместе с студентами моим начался процесс трансформировать код MATLAB и Gauss на R, потому что Phillips, он публиковал его код, он писал на MATLAB и Gauss. Я сейчас трансформирую это в R и начинал собирать package, но это медленный процесс, потому что у меня время маленький. И моя идея это собирать package, где я хочу положить все мой код про пузырь. У меня такое количество... Негативы? Да, но это длинный процесс, я только что начинал это сделать. Я почти закончил поставить, дублировать все MATLAB код на R, но сделал уже начинал писать package. Но это, конечно, медленный процесс. So, если есть R-программа, которая интересует это дело, пожалуйста, позвоните мне, потому что я буду очень рад, кто-нибудь, который помогает. Потому что у меня сейчас большое количество кода про пузырь, где тест, который сделал Surnet, тест, который сделал Fry, тест, который сделал Phillips. У меня все есть, но это раятель был все структурированный, all structure in a package. So, if there is someone interested to help with that, please let me know. Okay, so coming back and repeat just to refresh. We start from this augmented decay Fourier regression. We want to test that we have an explosive roots, rho bigger than 1. If rho is bigger than 1, вы понимаете, это значит, что завтра цена будет больше, чем вчера, понимаете? Только посмотрите, если rho это более чем 1, okay, это значит, что завтра цена будет более чем вчера. Okay? Чем сегодня, прошу прощения. So, it's explosive. So, it's opacity. The idea is to compute, of course, a recursive test where we take the supreme of this augmented decay Fuller, where we chase both the initial point and the end point. We do this for both. if we do this for both, we have the so-called generalized supremum, where we change both the initial and the final endpoint R2. So we try all possible estimation steps, all possible. Sami malenki, sami большие. Начало в конца. All possible combination. Phillips find, I told you the distribution of this test, the first theorem. It's an ugly formula. Если вы не статистик, забивайте, это неинтересно. Это длинная форма, где 2000 процесс Винера. Of course, you have to simulate it. If you reject this, so the test statistic is higher than the critical values, then we can date stamp. Не знаю, если вы знаете, что это по-английски значит date stamp. Date stamp значит, что мы можем понимать, когда был пузырь и когда заканчивал пузырь. Date stamp. Okay? To find when a process start and when a process end. В этой ситуации, когда пузырь начинается, когда пузырь заканчивает. Okay? Date stamp. Okay? It's in the second step. Второй шаг. Как я сказал, у нас пузырь, когда the recursive statistic is начинается, когда is bigger than the critical value начинается. Okay. Возвращаем сюда. Здесь пузырь начинается. Okay. И потом пузырь заканчивает, когда critical value crosses from the top down the critical value. Пузырь здесь заканчивает. Почему critical value едет вниз? Okay? So, здесь начинается, the critical value, the statistic is high, the critical value, и здесь заканчивает. Okay? This is graphically, this is more formally mathematically, also with infinitum and so on, infimum and so on. This is CVU is the critical value, usually at 95% and so on. Okay? I told you, as I told you before, Phillips used a minimum length for the puzir, which is delta time the natural logarithm of t. Big T is the number of observations. Сколько данных у нас есть? На t. Okay, so basically is this ratio, okay, time a correction factor of delta. This delta depends on the frequency. Если это недельный, месячный, лет, каждый лет и так далее. This represents the so-called minimum length of the bubble. Потому что я сказал, если вы используете, как, например, с данными биткоина каждый день, может быть, потому что это numerical approach, может быть, что он покажет у вас пузырь на 7 дня. Это невозможно, нереально. Пузырь должен быть несколько месяцев, несколько лет, зависит от данных. Okay? The first paper by Marot and Maru applied this test with Bitcoin. We are using that from 2011 and 2014 and find out 2 episodes of bubbles. One between August and October 2012 and another between November and February. Конечно, сами известные последние, но тоже первые были интересные. Что случилось на первый episode? Actually, August, October, I remember, was the first moment when there was first episode of very big interest, okay, in Bitcoin. I remember there were the first headlines about Bitcoin, the newspapers. There was a huge increase in the price that went around to 400, 500, then fall, collapse. Okay, so it was a big fall increase. Okay. So it's the first bubble episode. Then November and February, of course, very famous. Many things happened there in that period of time. There was the shutdown, the Silk Road, there was Mt. Gox default. There was the China crack, the first and last China crackdown on Bitcoin. So many things happened in this second period of bubbles. Okay. Anyway, if you have followed Bitcoin for a lot of period of time, you understand that also this period was very high. In fact, if you saw the price of Bitcoin, you have a first bump, then a fall, and then a huge bump up to the 1,000, then a big fall. But before the rise to 1,000, there was this period. And numerically, statistically, also this is an interesting bubble. Okay, so this is why with this procedure, you can verify multiple bubbles and be careful about it. Okay. Okay, a couple of words also prior discovery, also because I think this is maybe interesting for traders. More about managing, more than forecasting prior discovery is more important for managing, to decide where you go, in which exchange, which place I go. So this is very important if, for example, you participate in exchange. The price discovery literature basically want to find, suppose, have this starting point. We have a good, okay, a product, a good, a stock, whatever, and this good is traded on many exchanges, okay, on many exchanges. Как Bitcoin. Bitcoin vi možete trgovati na raznim mjestах, okay, BTC, BTCN, and so on. So, if you are a trader, but in general, you want to understand what is the market that contributes more to the price of Bitcoin. The market that gives you more, the highest contribution to the discovery of the real price of Bitcoin. Как это я могу делать? This paper is by Brandwell, published in the Journal of Economics, I don't remember which. Very nice paper that basically use this, because in the literature there are three approaches to this price discovery. I used the approach of De Jong in 2001, which actually has many beautiful properties because the information share for each exchange is unique. Consider the variance of so and many good properties to make it short. So let's go immediately to the models. So let's start with the setup. We have n individual exchanges. So we have n individual. La prima 10 торговых центров. BTN, BTC, BTSM, e так далее. And we have the markets and markets. In this case, the number of markets is equal to the exchange. What is this markets? In their setup, in their model, the market is simply all other exchanges combined. So, la primera, Bitstamp. What is the market for Bitstamp? The market for Bitstamp is all other market of Bitcoin except Bitstamp. For BTCN, what is the market for BTCN? Is all the sum of the other market, Chrome, BTCN, and so on. So the market for each exchange is simply the sum of all the other markets except that. This is why the number of markets is equal to n, also in this case. Then we have this hypothesis. Let's start, of course, we use it with natural logarithms. But I tell you this, the model can be summarized in these two equations. Okay? So we have the exchange price, see, PAT, price exchange at time t, is equal to the so-called efficient price or fundamental price. PT star, PT is звезда, это the real Bitcoin price, say, the fundamental Bitcoin price, который, к сожалению, мы не видим. Это что должен быть в этом время. And this is true for the exchange and for the market for the exchange. So this is the price. So for the exchange we have the price plus ошибки of this exchange. So we have the real Bitcoin price plus some plus шум, okay, в этом торговый центр. И цена рынка, глобальная рынка, это реальная цена, the efficient price, plus тоже шум большого рынка. Okay? This is really the key, the heart, the сердце model. So, the equation for the exchange, например, Bitstamp, so это реальный efficient price биткоина плюс шум, в этом шум, это шум, стоит забить это шум, это, например, это зависит от всех трейдеров, которые работают в Bitstamp, например, okay? У них есть, они, например, все из Китая или все из США, so, It's some noise created by the traders in that exchange rate. Second equation, this is the market for this exchange rate. The market je сказали все торговые центры кроме Bitstamp. So it's again, the price of Bitcoin in this market is equal to the efficient price plus shum of this market. Okay? And the efficient price, by definition, is a random walk. Okay? So, как вы понимаете, такой система is a classical simple example of co-integration. It's co-integrated by definition. What we want to find in this model, we want to understand which exchange contributes more to the final price, to the real price of Bitcoin. So the assumption in this model, these are needed, are the following. Okay, RT is the log return of the real efficient price. So this we have constant variance for simplicity. The log return of the real price can be correlated with the noise in exchange, can be correlated with the noise at the market, Psi, Psj. The log return of the efficient price can be correlated with the future shocks, gamma, alpha. The log return of the price of the Bitcoin price today can be correlated with the future shocks, innovation, news, shum in the markets. But, осторожно, log returns of the Bitcoin efficient price today cannot be correlated with the past shock, with the past innovation, with the past noise in the exchanges and in the markets. Okay. Also, we have some assumption about the variance in the shock, in the noise for the exchange. The shock in the exchange, the shock in the market can be correlated at time t, but cannot be correlated in the past. This is to make the model identify. Okay, so this is the assumption of this model. So, if we compute the log return of the real price, che ora mi video per caso again, so we have the difference of the price, the real price, efficient price, and the difference of the shock for the exchange rate or the shock of the market. So this is the formula for the process that we observe. Okay? Or, se mi della casa del Watercove Center, we have a vector of equation for each exchange and a vector for each market. This is a matrix notation. Еще пойдем дальше. Мы сейчас оцениваем ковариация между все торговые центры. И сделаем это простой ковариация. Улучшаем такую вещь, где трудно, но чуть-чуть скучно для меня. Первая автоковариация и второе автоковариация. Это только простая формула из анализа Вернера. Попробуйте дома, это не трудно. Это если вектор для всех торговых центров, это для один. Okay. Это автоковариация для торговый центр J и торговый центр I. Это автоковариация торговый центр J, торговый центр I, Iran и так далее. And this is the autocorrelation. You know, autocorrelation is the autocovariance divided by the variance. Or to make give you an idea about all this formula of covariance and on, we are interested in this part, in this parameter, Psi. Okay. Psi, in all this framework that we have all this formula, наверное, конечно, это поздно, все устали, хотят обедать, ты понимаю. Дайте мне еще 5 минут, потом пойду обедать. So, Psi is the most important parameter in this. What is Psi? Come back. Возвращаем чуть-чуть обратно. Psi is the covariance today between the return of the real efficient price and the shock in the exchange. Okay? So, this parameter is very important because tell you the highest is this parameter, the highest this exchange influence the Bitcoin price. So Bole Psi the higher is Psi, the higher this exchange rate contributes to the discovery of the Bitcoin price. Okay? Coming back, so as I told you, so it tell you, as I told you, it's very important because it tells you how the market learns after a price change from an individual exchange. So how the Bitcoin price change after a change in the individual exchange. For example, последний часа цена на Bitstamp увеличилась очень большое, много больше, чем на BTN, например. Почему? So, если эта цена увеличена, the increase in this price also from Bitstamp increases in all other exchange rate, это значит, there was a really strong reason behind this increase of the price. Instead, if this increase in the price in Bitstamp after a while come back and is not reported in other exchanges, means это bila только шум в этом exchange без эффекта. So the idea of this model is this exchange, например, Bitstamp, able to influence all the global market? Because да или нет? Сколько? Okay? This is what we want to answer. Okay? So if we compute the covariance between the efficient price and the price of a chain, we get these two components. So at the end of the day, in this model, what we want to estimate? We want to estimate the variance of the efficient price and this autocovariance. So нам нужно оценивать n plus 1 parameters. Okay? Но у нас есть только n ковариаций. У нас n plus 1 параметры, и у нам есть только n ковариаций. Нам нужно, we need one additional assumption to identify the model. Понимаете? We have to add one assumption in order to estimate. Почему? Потому что без one additional assumption we cannot estimate. Повторяю. N один параметр, сигма квадрат и n psi, so n плюс один параметр, но у нас есть только n автоковариаций, у нас n exchange. So now we have to add one assumption. De Jong proposed this additional assumption. He said that on average, so you see the average of covariation, the average covariance should be equal only to sigma square. Sigma square should be the average covariance. So это значит that the psi is the probability to have a trade in that exchange. So the weight for each time psi, this should be 0. Okay. This is the additional sum that we need to estimate the model. Okay. Also, what Bertold and other co-authors propose is to do the so-called information share. So we take the autocovariance, который вы только что видели. So pi is the proportion, is the probability to have a trade in exchange. You can estimate with the trade volume and so on. So the probability to have a trade in that exchange. So we take this one and we divide by sigma, which is the average covariance. So we have the so-called information share. The information share is the most important measure by this paper, and I really advise you to pay attention because really it tells you the percentage is a measure that goes from 1 to 0. So it's very easy to understand. The highest is the information share, the highest the exchange contributes to the discovery of the price. So it's influenced much more the price in general Bitcoin. Also, I told you, the sum of each information share sum to 1, so it's very easy. For example, if you want to know the information share of Bitcoin, Bitstamp plus BTN, just sum them up. So it's additive, so it's very beautiful properties. And so, and really, this gives you a very simple idea of how strong an exchange contributes. Example, and then promise, I finish. So, I skip the estimation, but it's quite easy. I go into the application in this beautiful paper. Brandwall considers 7 exchanges: BTFinex, Bitstamp, BTCA, BTC China, MTGOX, with Curex Canadian Virtual Exchange. And analyze it between April 2013 and February 2014, just before the bankruptcy of Antigox. Actually, they find out that BTC Antigox were those that on average had the highest information share. So they were contributing much more to the discovery of the price of Bitcoin. So they wanted to give it with other words, they were exchanges that were contributing more to the direction of Bitcoin's price. Okay? Actually, this value change is the average, but it changes over time. For example, they find out that BTC in China was very low, then increased a lot in December up to 32%, and then fall after the Chinese started crackdown on Bitcoin, so fall to only 12% of price discovered. Empty Ghost, the beginning was the largest contributor to the price discovery. See, 67%, very, very high. The main contributor to the price discovery. Then it fall down, increase a little bit in January before, and then, of course, went to zero. Also, in this paper, they find out a very interesting result. They analyze what happened to the Bitcoin price in October 2013, when there was the owner of the Silk Road was arrested. I told you Silk Road was this illegal online center where you can use Bitcoin, and not only Bitcoin, to buy arms and so on. And the owner was arrested. What happened in this day? Basically, they found that in this period, BTCE was the only exchange with the highest information share and the only exchange with the positive covariance between the error term in the BTC equation and the error term on the global market. So the only one that have the highest activity share. So the author says that this is fact that this was probably due because BTC, and probably you can confirm him, I don't know, but I ask for confirmation, is very renowned, is very respected in the Bitcoin community because it has very beautiful API to get data for algorithm trading. The fact that in this period, very volatile period, there were the highest information share and the only one with a positive out-covariance with the market seems to show that really the traders in this difficult time trusted this stock exchange, this Bitcoin exchange the most. The reason that they say is that because it's very famous for the APIs, for the infrastructure that is very efficient and so on. So this is very interesting result. To conclude, these approaches can be, I told you, interesting if you trade a lot in Bitcoin and you want to understand which exchange influence more the global Bitcoin price. This is the approach that you have to use. Of course, there are some limitations in this model, but it's a quite robust model. So if you do a lot of trading, probably this is the starting point. Really, thank you all. I'm sorry I didn't have the time to do practice, but I know it's quite late, so maybe we'll find some other time to do practice. Anyway, all the materials will be sent to you because in the второй и третья папка bila примери свар, который мы первый часть утром, и тоже, например, bila много код про пузыри, код LPPL, например, пример и так далее. So, если хотите знать побольше по прикладным примерам, пожалуйста, пишите мне по имейлу без проблем, и я отвечаю без проблем. Извините, время не было, но я думаю, все более-менее было понятно. Если вопросы, я здесь, без проблем сегодня, после, когда мы пойдем гулять, и так далее, без проблем. Еще раз я хочу благодарить. I want to thank you for the invitation to this place for the summer school, and I want to tell you good luck for your future if in the Bitcoin arena, or absolutely not Bitcoin, Ethereum, other future. Who knows? Maybe you are you will start the new Google of digital coins. So because you know, remember when I remember the 90s. At the 90s there were Excite, Altera Vista, Netscape. Probably this name for you doesn't. After some year, became Google. But you know, in the 90s, it was not Google the main one. It was this strange name, Excite, and then after the dot-com bubble. So maybe the next digital coin still have to be invented. Maybe it's one, maybe you. So good luck, удача и увидимся.
Спасибо. Коллеги, просто не забудьте, еще у нас есть маленькое объявление информационное. У нас коллеги из Уфы хотели выступить с сообщением информационным.
Буквально
5 минут, да.
Уж меня извините, да, просто хотел бы инициировать диалог, инициировать, может быть, некое взаимодействие. Буквально только для затравки я хотел бы.
Даю сейчас секундочку.
Простите, вас немножко, как говорится, подбеда отвлекаю.
И потом не расходитесь, у меня тоже будет для вас информационное сообщение, но это буквально на... Может быть, пока вы доключитесь, я скажу.
Кстати, а камера нужна?
3 часа. Можно выключить.